What it is, welcome back to the channel. It's your guy Neo Ness, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. This is your source for all things Neo Geo and video games. And today I have made a huge decision, and we're going to go through it. I sold 70% of my video game collection for one game. Let's get into it. Pretty much liquidated everything for one game. Now, I'm not a reseller. I normally don't trade a lot of games, but when I do, I generally do it for some grail games or quality, what you would consider a quality-based game. I had an opportunity to pick up a very rare title that isn't seen very often. Very good condition. Complete, near mint. Unfortunately, I didn't have the money, and I normally wouldn't have this kind of money, so I had to make a sacrifice. Now, this brings me to the topic of today's episode. What are you willing to sacrifice within your collection to obtain an item that you normally either one, don't see, or it could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to have? All right, I have a huge opportunity, and we've had this conversation on the channel numerous times. I've had this conversation on podcasts. The question comes up, Ness, what would you do? Would you sell? Would you get rid of your collection for this, this, and this? And I've always said that I would sell everything before I sell my Neo Geo collection, okay? My sole purpose behind this channel, why I started this channel, was because of Neo Geo, right? During my journey of collecting for Neo Geo, it spawned a tremendous amount of games across numerous consoles. Games that I had since I was a kid, games that I wanted to reacquire when I was a kid, some graded stuff, miscellaneous box consoles, all that jazz. Now I have an opportunity to get a very high level, I won't say high level, but a very expensive new game, to the point to where I need to liquidate my video game collection. I just don't have the money. As many of y'all out there that joke, Ness is rich, Ness got all this money.
And you, I'll take my gutter back. Rich ass.
No, I am not rich, okay? So I just budget very accordingly, had everything in price charting, and I removed some select titles that I wanted to keep for the collection. So I have some select titles on PlayStation that I'm keeping all of my Dreamcast stuff. I am liquidating all of my Xbox, OG Xbox and 360 games outside of some select titles. Xbox One is going away. The remaining portion of my PlayStation 2 is going away. PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 is going away. My NES, box NES, my loose carts, Super Nintendo is going away. 64 and Genesis is going away, outside of some select titles. So I've pulled titles that either, family member or friend got me, or my mom bought me, my wife. These are all things that I'm not getting rid of. But outside of that, everything else goes. Is this the game that I would never see again out in the wild or online, or it wouldn't be available from another seller? I would assume that it would be available. This is a game that can be found online. However, the price is extremely high, and I'm not willing to pay that price. So this is what I asked you. What would you do? You've spent years and years acquiring your collection, cataloging, alphabetizing, making sure that it's presentable in your game room, your storage room, your basement, your attic, wherever you're housing your games. And then one day you realize that you have to make a choice. Do you potentially pass on one of the greatest opportunities of your lifetime to obtain an item that many would probably say, and I know many of you watching are just going to say, dude, you can emulate this game. Why would you spend this kind of money? Why would you trade or sell a large portion of your collection and sacrifice all that hard-earned work that you put in to even have the game room that you have today? Well, that's a very good question.
Oh, is that viral?
That reseller called me. I spoke with him on the phone for about 20 minutes, and we kind of discussed what I had. And he's like, man, just send me a list. I am interested. So I went through my price charting inventory, and for those of you out there that haven't done an inventory on your games, I highly recommend it. Not even for reselling, but for security and insurance purposes. Keep track of everything that you have. I thought I did a really good job of keeping track of my inventory, but I actually had to go back through. There were games that I didn't remove from my inventory list. There were actually a few games that I didn't add from my inventory list, or I had duplicates, or I had removed duplicates. There's a lot of different things. So as you continue to grow, it's always good to have a comprehensive list, and it doesn't even have to be in one place. You can have them in multiple places. Maybe I have a list for my Neo Geo in multiple docs, programs, applications, just because I want to have all the information, what I paid, who I bought it from, all that. I have all that information compiled and that's just for me. Now, for the rest of my collection, my Xbox, my Nintendo, my Super Nintendo, my Sega Genesis, all that stuff, I really didn't have the cost of what I paid for it, just because maybe I was buying stuff in lots. It was hard to itemize what those prices were, or I was buying it online and I didn't really care. The Neo Geo was the one that I cared the most about tracking in terms of cost, price, all that information. So I didn't really have that. So I went off of price charting to figure out exactly how much I needed to sell to get the necessary money acquired. So from that, I had roughly 70% of my collection, which mainly consisted of all of my Xbox, all of my not all of my Super Nintendo, but a handful of my Super Nintendo, a majority of my Nintendo 64, which wasn't a lot, and the remaining portion of my Sega Genesis games, PlayStation, and then Nintendo Switch. So I only kept all the games that had nostalgia for me, meaning I had games that my mom had bought me when I was growing up, or friends had given me as gifts, or games that I played growing up that had sentimental value. I kept all of those. Consoles, I kept for the most part. I did get rid of my GameCube, and I got rid of a couple of miscellaneous things, collectible stuff, things of that nature, and we added that to the pot. Now, after it was all said and done, I was looking at roughly $30-some thousand in gaming merchandise that I had compiled into this list. Then I had to trim that down for the things that I wanted to keep, and also double check to make sure I actually had those things in my inventory. So after removing the games that I wanted to keep and then finding some discrepancies in the list, that trimmed us all the way down to $22,000. roughly in potential resale value. Now, however, mind you, for those of you out there that are looking to resell, you're never going to get 100%. Resellers that come in and buy collections, they have to make a margin, all these things. So I got a percentage. The reseller and myself negotiated on a price. I said, yeah, that's where I want to be, closely. So we met in the middle. So I didn't get my full number, but I was happy with what I got based off of when I bought these games, mainly my Xbox. Please note, and here's something to note: 32% of the games that were on my inventory list that I was selling were worth under $25. So if that means anything, that shows that about almost a third, a little bit over a third of my collection were a lot of fillers, a lot of junk, stuff that we talked about in the previous video, or quality and quantity. And I have been meaning to get rid of a lot of that. However, there were some really solid titles on the Xbox OG 360, Xbox One, meh. My NES, my Super NES, my 64, my Sega Genesis, I had some bangers, some superb bangers that I had to let go of to acquire the money that I needed, just because I had too much filler in the collection that I acquired over the years. So there's that. I made probably one of the hugest gaming sacrifices in my life. I gave up my years of grinding and finding these games at good prices, conditions, and pieced certain things together that weren't complete. And that took time, took money, and I gave it all away. Was it worth it? To many of you, it may not be. And that's where I go back to this. What would you do? The games that I'm letting go of, I have a 95% probability of finding those games again and re-adding them to the collection. For all of you out there that say, dude, this is dramatic. You've got all these games and then you're getting rid of all these games, then you can just emulate. I get that. But again, this isn't about emulation. This is about a passion to preserve. And while, yes, it was hard to letting go of a library that I've built so long, and yeah, I got a little emotional because, I mean, it was a very difficult situation. I didn't give myself a lot of time to think on it. You know, normally I would pull it off the shelf, but we're talking about 3 shelves worth of video games that I would have had to pull off and move. So I just pulled the trigger and did it. Would you make the sacrifice for a once in a lifetime opportunity to obtain that grail game, that rare game, or just that game that you've been after for so long and no one seems to have it online, no seller seems to have it, or the condition that you need it in just isn't there? I made the choice, I made the sacrifice. Are you able to do the same thing? Many would probably say no, it's not worth it. Some may say, I could get this stuff back. Others might say, I'd be done. Just get rid of it all. I'll emulate it all. Is there a right or wrong answer? I don't know. I don't have that answer for you. I will say this. I have spent the last week looking at empty shelves, trying to decide how to refill these. And it's not a matter of I need to fill them with games. I need to put all the games back in there. I need to fill it all the way back up to the brim so it looks good. No, it's a completely different perspective now. I think as collectors, as gamers, especially physical collectors, we have a tendency to get attached to a lot of really just the quantity of the games. It's like a security blanket, if you will. It gives that vibe when you walk into the room that you've accomplished the completion. And for a lot of collectors, we're never done. We're always collecting. We're always buying something, whether that's a marquee or a poster, a statue, a collector's edition, an arcade cabinet, a neon light, a t-shirt, a toy. There's so many things, and yet I'm collecting for a extremely hard, rare console. These games don't pop up at your local retro stores, and if they do, a lot of times it's not going to be the hard title to find. It's always going to be the common stuff. For you out there, whether it's Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation, have you had to make the sacrifice for that item that you've just always wanted? This is material. This is a material question. So we're not talking about something that, you know, is a necessity to your way of life. This is within your realm of a hobby. Could be video games, it could be anything else, but have you had to make a sacrifice within that hobby to get the top of the creme de la creme in terms of collectibles? I'd love to hear what many of you have to say in the comments. Drop comments down below and let me know. And in terms of the game that I got, Tiberius? Yes, Ness, I am taking over. For those of you out there that wish to know what Ness acquired, he is adding a very rare title on the Neo Geo on this very shelf. If you wish to know what it is, I will tell you. However, you will have to tune in till next week. 3 days. I, Tiberius co-host, will let the world know what Ness acquired and what he sacrificed his video game collection for. Stay tuned. This is to be continued. See you